Chapter 9 of Wanderings in New South Wales, Batavia, Pedir Coast, Singapore and China, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Wanderings in New South Wales, Batavia, Pedir Coast, Singapore and China, Volume 1 by George Bennett. Large quantities of native perch are caught in the Yass and Murrumbidgee rivers. Their flavour is delicious. Their average length is 19 inches and the weight from 3 to 6 pounds. They have, however, been taken from 2.5 to 3 feet in length and weighing 70 pounds, and some even of the enormous size of 100 and 120 pounds. The breadth is great in proportion to the length of the fish. These I examined were of a yellowish-green colour, covered with irregular black spots, with a silvery abdomen. They are named by the colonists river cod and by the Aborigines mewaruk. In the stomach of this fish I frequently found shellfish of the genus Unio in an entire state. The larger kind of these shells the natives of the Tumat country called Nargan, and the smaller usually found in rivulets or creeks, Pindaquin or bucky. Occasionally half-digested masses of green caterpillars and other insects were also found in the stomach of this fish. In the Tumat country, varieties of the river cod are called by the natives biwak, mungi, etc. Another fish of the family of perches is also caught in the Yass, Murrumbidgee and other large rivers in the colony. It is called the perch by the colonists and kupe by the natives. I preserved a specimen caught in the Murrumbidgee, measuring 17 inches in length and 6 inches at its greatest breadth, containing a fine roe. 20 inches was the greatest length they had as yet been taken in this river, but like the river cod, it increases more in breadth in proportion to its weight than in length. The colour of the kupe was inclining to bronze. The ends of the scales being black gave to the fish a checkered appearance. Among the native inhabitants of the Yass district was a pair of originals. The man was called Daraga, and his lady the beautiful Kitty of Yass. Neither of them had pretensions to beauty. The lady had ornamented her delicate form, for all the ladies are fond of adornments, with 2 opossum tails, pendant in a graceful manner from her greasy locks. Pieces of tobacco pipe, mingled with coloured beads, adorned her neck. An old, dirty opossum skin cloak was thrown over the shoulders, a bundle of indescribable rags round the waist, and a netball or coolie hanging behind, filled with a collection of small deer and other eatables that would baffle all attempts at description, completed the toilette of this angelic creature. Of her features I shall only say they were not such as painters represent those of Venus. Her mouth, for instance, had a striking resemblance to the gaping entrance of a wombat's burrow. The husband also had decorated the locks of his cranium with opossum tails, with the addition of grease and red ochre. A tuft of beard ornamented his chin, and the colour of his hide was barely discernible from the layers of mud and charcoal covering it. He wore a spritsail yard through his apology for a nose. The opossum skin cloak covered his shoulders, and the kumil, or belt of opossum skin, girded the loins. The pipe was his constant companion, as the love of tobacco among those who have intercourse with Europeans is unbounded, and no more acceptable present can be made them. At mealtimes, it was curious to observe the conduct of this interesting couple and the kangaroo dogs. It was evident that no good feeling subsisted betwixt the parties. The dogs regarded the former with an expression of anger, and the opposite party looked both sulkily and anxiously at the canine species. The dogs appeared instinctively to fear that the human creatures would devour every morsel of the food, and that they should be minus their share, whilst the latter seemed to know, either by instinct or practical experience, that large dogs bite tolerably hard when angry. Black and white cockatoos had lately become very numerous about this part of the country. The former appeared to have been attracted by some trees that had been felled when clearing a spot of land for cultivation, as these birds visit the dead or fallen trees to procure the larvae of insects that breed in them. I have seen more than once small trees lying prostrate, occasioned by the powerful bills of the large black cockatoos, who, observing on the trunk, externally, indications of a larva being within, have diligently laboured to extract it, and should the object of their search be situated, as often occurs, far in, before they reach it, the trunk is so much cut through that the slightest puff of wind lays it prostrate. Among some of the few vegetable productions in use among the Australian blacks as food is the root of a species of bulrush which they name cormiork. It grows abundantly on the banks of the Yass, Murrumbidgee, Tumat and other rivers. The roots are eaten only when young. They are prepared by being baked and the epidermis removed. Europeans who have partaken of it say it has an agreeable farinaceous taste. The roots are collected in spring when the young plants have just commenced sprouting. Among other farms about Yass Plains is Mount Lavinia, the property of my late fellow-traveller Henry O'Brien Esquire, at whose place I passed many agreeable days during my sojourn at Yass. The house has been erected in a picturesque situation upon a hill of moderate elevation, near the base of which the Yass River winds its course. The effect on the approach to the house is extremely pretty. The view from the hill overlooks a good extent of picturesque country. The greatest part is devoted to sheep pasturage, and some portion of arable land is alone wanting to make this spot still more charming. From another hill on the plains, a short distance from that just mentioned, the view is still more expansive, overlooking the extensive verdant downs, surrounded in the distance by thinly wooded hills, terminated in the southwest direction by distant blue mountains, near which flows the fine stream of the Murrumbidgee. The plains were animated by herds of cattle, flocks of sheep, and troops of horses, grazing, reposing, or exercising. The whole combination of this beautiful scenery excited the most pleasing sensations, which were heightened by its English character, and caused the settler to reflect less on the remoteness from home. When surrounded by his family circle and a few select friends, language, manners, customs, being all in accordance with his own native land, his farm once under cultivation and stocked, he feels but few, if any, wants. Above all, he has no anxious moments about the future welfare of his children, as there are few difficulties in a new country in providing for them. And although many complain of the dullness of bush life, it is seldom the case with those who are practically acquainted with it, for time rapidly passes away in the various enjoyments of a rustic life, and the superintendence of duties which the farm imposes on a settler, each tending to advance his prosperity. The farm produces the necessary daily supplies for the tables, and the sale of the wood gives a cash income for the purchase of other articles, as wearing apparel, tea, sugar, agricultural implements, etc. Sydney is therefore usually visited once annually to dispose of the wool or ship it to England, and to purchase any supplies that may be required for the use of the family or farm of the settler. Early on the morning of the 11th of October, in company with Mr. Manton, I left Mount Lavinia to visit a part of the country about the Murrumbidgee River, and 14 or 15 miles distant from Yass. We crossed the extensive plains and entered a bush track leading through a fine open forest country. Some of the land was boggy, but the most part consisted of open forest with rich pasturage, and was well circumstanced for the several sheep and cattle stations we passed. From the general excellent quality of land on and in the vicinity of the Yass Plains, as well as being well watered, extensive purchases from the government have been made by the settlers already having grants here, and nearly the whole, with water frontage, has been purchased. I'm inclined to think that this part of the colony will prove the richest and most valuable of almost any of the present known portions. On approaching the Murrumbidgee River, the character of the scenery increases in beauty, assuming even a romantic appearance, the broken country adding to rather than diminishing the effect. The day was cloudless with a brilliant sun, so the prospect extended to a great distance. Green sloping hills, thinly timbered, only wanting the addition of mansions to the natural lawns and parks to perfect the landscape. Flowers of great variety and gay colours strewed the ground in the utmost profusion. The indigo shrub, Indigofera australis, was also abundant in flower, with numerous other flowering plants. Green natural fields decked the level land. The songs of birds and their increased numbers were sufficient to acquaint us that we were approaching a river. The scene was of the most animated description. In the distance, long lines of swamp oaks, Casuarina pallidosa, readily distinguished by their dark, peculiar appearance, indicated to us the course of the river. Having enjoyed the prospect from the elevation, we descended a deep hill, proceeded through a luxuriant pasturage which was bounded by thinly wooded hills carpeted with verdure, and soon arrived on the bank of the Murrumbidgee stream, which may be, at this part, 40 or 50 yards wide. On the opposite side of the river, Mr. Manton possessed a grant, which he had just commenced to stock and cultivate. The locality appeared excellent during the cool months, but liable to be soon parched by the fervent summers. Having hobbled our horses, that eagerly fed on the luxuriant grass surrounding them, we crossed the river in a canoe which had been scooped by Mr. Manton's servants from the solid trunk of a water-gum tree, eucalyptus, and was capable of carrying 4 or 6 persons. Arriving on its opposite side, we were now beyond the acknowledged limits of the colony, although numerous cattle and sheep stations extend to a great distance further. On the banks of this fine stream, besides numerous flowering shrubs, the elegant swamp oaks towered to the elevation of 50 or 60 feet, their dark filiform foliage giving them the character of the larch. Besides these, which were by far the most numerous, there were some enormous trees of the eucalyptus genus, called water-gum by the colonists. They attain from 90 to 100 feet in height, with a diameter of from 6 to 8 feet. The wood is of a reddish colour and very hard. On account of the latter quality, it is less frequently used, being difficult to cut. The currajong, hibiscus, also grew about the limestone rocks in the vicinity, and was readily to be distinguished from other trees by the lighter and more vivid green of its foliage. A number of European genera of plants indigenous to the country, or at all events from their situations giving reason to suppose so, grew in the vicinity of this river. Among others, the sow thistle, the young tops of which are eaten by the natives just before the plant commences to blossom, a small red poppy, the crowfoot, a rumex or rock, lancifolia geranium, and shepherd's purse, Thlaspi bursa pastoris, were abundant, and they are seen very far in the interior beyond this place. Some caves have been lately found in the limestone rocks about this selection, and since the valuable discovery of fossil bones in those at Wellington Valley by Major Mitchell and others, limestone caverns have become one of the colonial lions. These, therefore, were pointed out to me as objects of great curiosity. I found them, however, very small, and they did not repay the trouble of getting into them. They resembled the small caves often seen in the limestone quarries of Plymouth and Orriston in Devonshire, from which some valuable fossils have been procured. Stalactites of course abounded, but neither fossils nor any red calcareous earth, in which those remains have usually been found deposited. Among a quantity of dust were several loose bones, which had been at first described to me as fossils, but which were the breastbones and tibiae of the emu, and skulls and other bones of dogs, which no doubt had been placed there by the natives. For the tibiae of the emu, here called beraban by the blacks, had a hole at the upper and anterior part. This perforation is made, as many of them afterwards told me, to enable them more readily, by admitting air, to suck out the rich marrow from the lower end, which was broken for that purpose. The extent of the cavern was from 15 to 20 feet, the entrance so narrow that the explorer could only enter feet foremost, nor was it sufficiently large in the interior to enable him to stand erect. About sunset we returned to Yass, having a fine moonlight night for our journey. The Aborigines have many superstitious ceremonies connected with their practice of the healing art, as we find among all primitive nations. Those persons who take upon themselves the occupation to attend upon the sick or wounded unite the offices of priest, soothsayer, and physician. The few medicines administered by them are from the vegetable kingdom. They also make use of a crystal for the cure of diseases, not by administering it to the sick person, but the physician employs its aid to act upon the superstitious mind of his patient. It is the common quartz crystal, and is called by the natives in the vicinity of Sydney Kraji Kibba, or Dr. Stone. This name, borrowed from the Europeans, is sometimes employed by the Yass natives, but that by which it is characterized by them, and likewise by the natives of the Murrumbidgee and Tumat countries, is Marudagel. The Aborigines say they manufacture it, but would not mention the ingredients of which it is composed. This was a secret. The women are never permitted to look upon it, and the priests impose their minds a belief that, should their curiosity prompt them so far, they would instantly die. These crystals are valued by them according to their size, and it is not easy to procure a large one from them. They are not only regarded as a charm by which wounds and diseases of the human frame can be cured, but they advance another step by declaring that when thrown at a person, accompanied, I suppose, by certain incantations, it will have the power of causing his death. This power, said by them to be possessed by the stone, having been mentioned one day by a native to a European settler, the latter ridiculed it and desired the black to put it to the test by throwing it at him. This, however, was refused, he being good man, alluding to the European, he no want kill him. And after using every endeavour to induce Blackie to make the trial, he shuffled out of the dilemma by acknowledging that it would have no effect upon the whitefellas. The following account of the manner in which the crystal is used by the physician may be considered interesting. In the Tumat country, a native black named Golong was suffering from a spear wound received a short time previous in a skirmish with a hostile tribe. It was in the evening, for the stones are only used after dark, as at that time their efficacy is considered greater, when a native of his tribe, named Barramumbup, employed the crystal for the purpose of healing the wound in the following manner. The patient was laid at a distance of 20 or 30 yards from the encampment, after which the physician commenced the examination of the wound, which he sucked. Then, without spitting, he retired to a distance of 10 or 15 yards from the invalid, muttered or appeared to mutter some prayer or invocation for about a minute. On concluding, he placed the crystal in his mouth, sucked it, and then removed the stone, spat upon the ground, and trampled upon the discharged saliva, pressing it with his feet firmly into the earth. This ceremony was repeated several times on this and subsequent evenings, until the patient's recovery, which of course was considered to have been effected by the wonderful curative properties resident in the crystal. On making inquiry why the physician is so careful in trampling the saliva discharged from his mouth into the ground, no satisfactory reason could be obtained, a vague answer only being returned to the query. But it is not improbable that they consider by this operation they finally destroy the power of the evil spirit, extracted by the operation through the virtues of the stone. Some such reason for this proceeding may be inferred from an observation made to any European who may be present at this part of the ceremony, that he no come up again. A somewhat analogous custom exists among the aboriginal tribes of Brazil, called Guachos, as related by Spix and M.R.C.S in their Brazilian travels. Their payers or physicians, called in their language Vunageneto, are conjurers and exorcists of the evil principle, which they call Nanigojigo. Their cures of the sick are very simple and consist principally in fumigating or in sucking the part affected, on which the payer spits into a pit as if he would give back the evil principle which he has sucked out to the earth and bury it. End of chapter 9.